China is on the move again, quite literally. Around 130 million people moved from the farms to the cities in recent decades to fuel the country's phenomenal industrial growth. And now tens of millions of those same people are being forced to make a return journey as the global recession drives the factories to closure. But for millions of people, return is just not an option. Land reform and changing economic priorities mean there's no farm and no work for them to return to. Hello, I'm Taimur Nabili, and on this edition of 101 East, we examine the social and political challenges facing China in a time of economic crisis. There are no official figures, but estimates say as many as 750,000 small and medium-sized companies have gone out of business in China during this economic downturn. As a consequence, some 20 million people have lost their jobs, and this year's crop of 6 million graduates faces a daunting task to find their first pay packet. As Steve Nettleton reports, the outlook is particularly bleak in Guangzhou, the manufacturing hub of southern China and one of the hardest hit cities in the country.
Unemployed and running out of time, SHUANGFU pedals across China's industrial capital, Guangzhou, hoping to find work. It's a daily cycle, from job markets to factory gates, that ends in frustration. Liu lost his job at a ladies' handbag factory late last year. Broke, he returned to his home village in Sichuan for the Chinese New Year holiday, afraid to face his parents who rely on his earnings.
I went home with nothing. I was sure that my mother would blame me. They said, "You just roamed around, doing nothing, wasting time." I tried to explain to them it was because of the financial crisis, but they did not understand what that was.
Liu is one of more than 20 million migrant workers in China who have lost their jobs in the last few months, as thousands of factories in major cities have shut down or slashed their workloads. Some have given up and tried to start new lives back home. But many have returned to the cities, seeing the tightening manufacturing industry as the only lifeline to support their families. It is harder to find a job at home, he says. There is nothing to do in my hometown. We do not have any skills, and farming is not possible. Unable to find a decent wage back home, Liu SHUANGFU came back to Guangzhou, along with his sister and her boyfriend. His sister found a job in a handbag workshop, but Liu was turned away. He says he has no choice but to keep on searching.
Here in Guangzhou, it is so hard to find a job, and the salary is so low. I'm really nervous about how my life is going. We have to pay the rent, our daily needs, everything. I'm really frustrated. I have never thought about my future, but I don't have much confidence.
The swelling masses of unemployed present an increasing concern to China's leadership.
If the issue of migrant workers' unemployment goes unsolved, it could very easily lead to social instability and cause social conflict, even political turbulence. This is something no one will be happy to see.
Worried about the potential for unrest, China has stepped up security in areas where migrant workers gather. And the central government has trained more than 3,000 public security directors from across China on how to defuse rallies and protests before they explode into violent outbreaks. Adding to the government's worries are the more than 6 million new university graduates who will join the already dismal job market this summer. Students who once expected that a degree would guarantee them well-paid careers are finding they must compete for even menial jobs. Among them is Tang Li, who will graduate from a logistics university in Beijing. She began working part-time at KFC 4 years ago to help offset the cost of her studies. But after half a year of fruitless job hunting, she worries it may be the only job she can find.
In our class, not so many people have found a job. Most of the ones who did had personal connections with the company. Some of the students have already returned to their hometowns because most of us are not from here. I still hope that I can find a good job in logistics in Beijing. I don't want to go back home.
China is hoping to reignite its economy with a nearly $600 billion stimulus plan. It has unleashed a wave of new construction, including new railway lines, highways, and environmental projects. But some say the government's plan does not go far enough to create new jobs. Mao YUSHI, one of China's top economists, believes the plan is focused too heavily on lifting economic growth rates, which he says do not necessarily lead to a major drop in unemployment.
In the recent months, we heard that the crime rate is rising. That means unemployment is related with the social unrest. Although they are not angry and not, 他们不是对政府有什么仇恨，但是他生活没来源了。
KAIMING, a labor rights activist in Shenzhen, thinks some stimulus money might be put to better use in another way.
To solve unemployment, the government cannot use traditional ideas. The most important thing is to improve workers' conditions. We need to provide them basic housing, education for their children, make the cost of living affordable. China's advantage has always been its massive supply of inexpensive farmer workers. They have helped China develop for the last 30 years. So it's time to provide them the most basic living and working conditions.
For SHUANGFU and others stranded outside the gates of China's factories, better conditions would be welcomed, especially if they come with a salary.
Well, with me in our Kuala Lumpur studio to discuss the tensions in China are Geoffrey Crothall, editor of the China Labour Bulletin, and Apo Leong, China coordinator of the Hong Kong-based Asia Monitor Resource Centre. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. Apo, let me begin with you. 20 million seems to be the figure that's bandied around, but just give me an idea of what kind of figures the government actually acknowledges and what the reality really looks like in terms of unemployment.
The official figure stands at 4.2% of unemployed, but someone estimate, as high as 45 million people. In fact, these migrant workers are not calculated officially as unemployed because these are WUKO system, household registration, considering them as farmers, not as workers.
Those numbers sound huge, obviously, but give us a sense of what they mean. I mean, within the China context and within the structure that they operate, is that a bearable number or is that a catastrophe?
If you look at the numbers of migrant workers as a whole, it's generally estimated there are around 130 million migrant workers across China. If 20 million of those lose their jobs, it's a significant impact, but it's not a complete disaster. China has been dealing with moderately high levels of unemployment for quite a long time. The China Social Sciences Academy estimates that the actual unemployment rate is closer to 10% than the official 4.5.
And let's just talk about where it's going to go. There seems to be a great deal of difference in people's estimations of where China's economy is right now. Some of the global institutions are now cutting it back to around 6% growth. Yes. China's government is saying 8%. I know some economists in this part of the world who are saying 4%, you'll be lucky. What are your thoughts?
Well, this maintaining 8% is the #1 priority of many government officials in China. But we don't believe 8% or 6% because it's very much a boosted figure. Each province and each county, they have to make up the figures to satisfy the needs of the central government. What we want to see is the concrete GDP, or what we call the human GDP, the green GDP. Does the GDP growth benefits the Chinese people?
What does that actually mean in real terms? Are we going to see China's economy actually benefiting those unemployed people, or are we going to see this number just grow until the point where it becomes a real catastrophe?
I think unemployment will remain at a relatively high level for quite a while. China's economy has been booming for many years, and now it's seeing low to moderate growth. So again, it's not a disaster, but times are going to be very tough.
Is the government ready to cope with this?
The government is very concerned and is making great effort to try and deal with the problem by providing this huge stimulus package and trying to invest in underdeveloped areas.
We talk about huge stimulus package, but is it huge enough?
Much of the chunk goes to infrastructure. Of course, this is good in some way, but how it trickles down to creation of unemployment, and more importantly, the social safety net for the poor farmers, for the unemployed, and these people are in desperate need.
Let's pause there for a second. We'll talk about some of the consequences of these policies and some of the future in China. And when we come back, we'll also have a look at one couple and some of their friends who lost their jobs in the city, and they're trying to eke out a living back in their home village. We'll have their story after this. Stay with us.